So please join me in giving a warm welcome to our very first speaker of the evening, un gros bienvenue, Jonathan Ginter with Are We Out of Time?
And the countdown begins. So we're going to talk about time, appropriately enough. Time is a mysterious thing. It's mysterious because, unlike electricity, we don't really know very much about it. We don't know how it began. We don't know what it's composed of. We don't know how to manipulate it. We do know that time is relative. We do know that time passes at different rates for different people under different circumstances. And this has already been scientifically theorized and proven. We also know something else. And it's kind of a common sense thing. We know that time moves forward. Well, of course, everybody knows that time moves forward. And scientists call this the arrow of time. And the reason that this is significant is that they have absolutely no reason to believe that it should. There's not a single scientific principle that says that time should always move forward. And yet that's what we see. But last year, believe it or not, they experimentally proved that time can move backwards. That future events can affect past events, which is a little mind-blowing because naturally the first question is, wait a minute, my eggs don't unscramble. My vase is still broken. I don't perceive this. Why can time move backwards and we don't perceive it? Largely because of the biology of perception. It's the way that you are built. It's the way that your body has evolved, the way that your mind has evolved to perceive your reality. There's a lot of things that you actually are incapable of perceiving. So as an example, you only really perceive less than 1%, about 0.00085% of what's out there. If you look at the visual spectrum that your eyes can register, the audible the sound spectrum that your ears can hear, very little of what's out there you can actually perceive. And what you do take in, your mind heavily edits. There's a lot of stuff going on that your brain says, oh, that's so irrelevant. And consequently, a lot of what your eyes are taking in, a lot of what you hear is rejected simply because it's not relevant to the task at hand. And there are these selective awareness tests that are very popular. You can go on YouTube and find a whole bunch, change blindness, and you'll see for yourself what we're talking about. Now, our senses provide very basic data. Light waves, compression of air that we turn into music and laughter. It's a little bit like living in a submarine where sonar is the only thing you've got, but you've got this great computer that turns that into a map of the seafloor. These are fish, that's a whale. So your mind is building the reality that you're perceiving out of this very fundamental data that it's taking in. And this is really important. This actually goes back to a philosophical idea that was first put out there by Descartes and since has evolved into various philosophical arguments, including the matrix. Are we brains in a jar? How do we know that what we're perceiving is what's really out there? Well, what we're perceiving is a model of what's out there, and it helps us understand what's out there. But let's get back to causality, this thing about future and past. Why does that bother us? That bothers us because we think of these things as physically separate. We think of these things as distant from each other. But what if they weren't? What if past and present and future were actually commingled in one moment? It wouldn't bother us at all that future affected past and past affected future. Well, of course, they're rubbing shoulders all the time. But that would mean that your life is a lot like a film that's been spliced up every frame, and then they're all been superimposed on top of each other. Moments laid upon moments laid upon moments. Now, the problem with that is that that is an almost impossible thing to live through. The idea that your whole life is happening in one instant is not a useful construction for your brain. So much like a movie that was spliced up that way would be an impossible movie to watch. You wouldn't enjoy it. So you would take all those frames apart and you would try and lay them out in an order that makes sense to you. You try and move through them in a chronology that makes for a good film. And I think that your mind is doing this to time. Your mind is doing this to your life. It's imposing order. So what is the arrow of time? If this is all true, then the arrow of time is simply an illusion. It's the effect of you moving through your life in an order that makes sense to you, which is why time moves forward. Why? Because it's the right way for us to experience our lives. just the same way that you would not watch a movie backwards. Now, enlightenment is an interesting concept. Enlightenment is all about being able to enforce the right mental discipline to get past the barriers of perception so that you perceive what? That everything is one. And one of those concepts that enlightenment is supposed to give you is that time is a creation. Time is an illusion. Time is something that you create. And now we're out of it. Thanks.